He found them huddled on a train platform, 4 little girls in old coats barefoot with no parents beside them, only a note that said, "Please don't send us back." And he made a decision inadvertently opening the door to a secret that would change their entire lives. It was snowing outside. Luke Harrison was just trying to get home before it snowed more. The roads were almost silent, the kind of silence that pressed against the windows and made everything seem farther away. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other holding the warm cup of coffee he'd forgotten to drink. As he passed the old train station on the edge of town, long closed, barely lit, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a pile of abandoned coats. But then the coats shifted. He slammed on the brakes. "Get out!" And what he saw took his breath away for a second. 4 girls, sitting side by side, shivering. Their faces were pale. Their legs were bear-soaked. One of them was holding her youngest sister on her lap, trying to keep warm. No luggage, no adults around. Just a crumpled piece of paper in the oldest girl's coat pocket. "Please don't send us back, please." Luke leaned down slowly, not to scare them. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. The oldest girl nodded, her chin shaking. "We don't know where else to go." He looked at them all, 4 of them strangers. He could have called someone. Maybe he should have. But he didn't, taking off his coat and saying, "Come on, let me warm you up." He didn't know it then. But that single decision on a snowy night in the middle of nowhere would change everything. Luke didn't say much on the drive back. Not because he didn't have any questions, but because he thought they needed some quiet time. So he just turned on the heater and let the silence settle like a blanket. The cabin was a modest place. The wood-burning stove, the chipped mugs, a few books stacked on broken shelves. He hadn't shared it with anyone in years. He opened the door, stepped aside, and said, "This is my house, small but warm." The girls slowly entered, as if they had found something precious. The youngest, Maggie, reached out and took his hand before letting go again. A reflex. Trust, trying to remember how to do things. Luke lit the fire-boiled water. No big speeches. There's only silence when you're alone. Finally, the eldest girl, Emma, speaks. "You live here alone." Luke pauses, then nods. "Yes." Emma doesn't smile, not exactly, but she looks around with new eyes. "We won't see each other much," she says quickly. "We just need a place to rest. We can sleep on the floor." Luke hands her a folded blanket. Soft old. It's survived many winters. "You'll sleep in the bed," he says, not unkindly. "And if anyone cooks breakfast tomorrow, it won't be me." "Okay." Emma blinks, then nods. "Okay." The cabin is different that night. The fire burns a little brighter. The silence is no longer empty. And Luke lay awake longer than usual, not because he was worried, but because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. And somehow that wasn't scary. It felt as if maybe the house had held its breath, waiting for someone to come home. Morning came with a slow winter light filtering through the old curtains. Luke hadn't expected much. Maybe a little quiet, a few sleepy footsteps. He slept surprisingly well, still not sure if it was the warmth from the fire or the soft breathing at the end of the hall. But when he stepped into the kitchen, he stopped. There was steam. There was movement. And a smell, burning oats mostly, but mixed with something warmer, sweeter. Emma was standing barefoot on an overturned bucket, carefully stirring a pot with a spoon almost too big for her hand. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her face was focused. "Good morning," Luke said softly. Emma started, almost dropping the spoon. I thought maybe we could make breakfast," she said quickly. "To thank you. I didn't mean to break the stove." Luke held up a hand, reassuring. "I'm fine," he said. "Didn't even know that pot still worked." 2 smaller footsteps came from the hallway, Claire and Sophie, holding mismatched bowls like treasures. Maggie toddled in behind them with a spoon and a toy horse she'd obviously adopted from somewhere in the cabin. Luke stood still, watching. The once echoing space was now full. Not loud, but full like music coming from someone's breath. He took a breath, sat down. He was handed a bowl of oatmeal so thin that even he was surprised. Claire slid a napkin toward him. On it was a flower drawn in pink crayon and the words, "Thank you for letting us live here." He didn't answer. He just smiled. He tucked the napkin into the pocket of his flannel shirt, because some things are better felt than explained. And in that moment, in that kitchen full of misaligned plates, tired eyes, and children trying their best, something had changed. Not too loudly, but he felt warm, and enough. Enough to feel like they weren't just passing through. Maybe they were starting something. Luke had always thought of the cabin as temporary, not because he was planning to leave, but because he never planned to put down roots again. The roof leaked in 3 places. The porch steps creaked as if they were remembering better days. The shed out back had been nothing but wind for more than a decade. But somehow that first weekend, things began to change. Claire, who was quiet, began collecting scraps of fabric from an old chest in the attic. One afternoon, Luke watched her hunched over a drab sewing kit, stitching together mismatched pieces of fabric, yet somehow creating something beautiful. "What are you making?" he asked. "A curtain," she said softly, "for the window by Maggie's bed." She said the stars made her nervous. And just like that, the stars became less scary. Sophie, the most curious, had found a screwdriver and was fixing the hinges on the back door. "I saw it on YouTube once," she said with a shrug. It creaked like it was crying. Emma. She'd drawn a blueprint, an actual blueprint, labeled and all. A sketch of how to turn an abandoned warehouse into a place people could go if they had nowhere else to go. Luke stared at the lines and arrows. "I'm 10, he said. "I Googled everything," she replied, as if that explained everything. And Maggie, sweet, quirky Maggie, was filling glass jars with water at various levels and tapping them gently with a spoon. Luke tilted his head. "What's this?" "A song," she whispered, "but you have to listen very softly." He did, and it was true. By Sunday, the cabin looked the same from the outside, but inside it was moving, not because the furniture had moved, but because the people inside had moved. Luke found himself humming again, even whistling. The floors still creaked, the roof still leaked, but for the first time in years, the house seemed to have a reason to stay the same, because someone believed it was worth fixing. It started with a scarf, not a new one, handmade, fuzzy in the way only real wool and real care can be. It hung on the porch one morning, neatly tied in a bow. No notes, no footprints in the snow, just warmth left behind. Luke assumed it was from a neighbor, though he didn't have many. But then the next day there were more. A box of homemade cookies, a children's book wrapped in brown paper, the corners softened with age. A carved miniature horse left on the porch railing right where Maggie liked to sit. Each gift was small, simple, but intentional. The kind of thing that said, "I see you. I remember." Emma was the first to speak out loud. I think she's been watching us." Luke looked up from his coffee. "Who?" "Our mother." He didn't answer right away. The girls never talked much about their parents, just bits and pieces. Emma carried most of that knowing, remembering. She shielded the others from the burden of it. "She wouldn't have left," Emma said softly. "She must be close. She hasn't gone anywhere." And Luke wanted to believe it. He really did. That evening, just before dusk, Luke stepped outside. The wind had died down. The sky was a deep gold, making everything seem quieter than usual. At the edge of the trees, something moved. A figure, too far away to see clearly, standing still, looking at the cabin. Not approaching, not retreating, just being. Luke didn't call. He didn't move. He just stood there, hands in his coat pockets, looking back. And maybe that was enough. Maybe she needed to know the door was open without being invited in. Inside, Maggie was humming again. Claire was teaching Sophie how to thread a needle. Emma sat by the fire, writing something in a notebook she wouldn't let anyone else read. Luke stood by the window for a moment longer. The cabin no longer belonged to him alone. And outside, someone who had been a part of it was looking for a way home. It arrived on Tuesday. No knock, no mail truck coming down the street. Just a plain envelope tucked between the slats of the front porch, creased at the edges, sealed tight. Emma was the first to find it. She held it as if it might break. Luke turned it over in his hands, slowly and uncertainly. No return address, no stamp. Just a name written in thin, deliberate handwriting. To the person who kept them safe. He read it at the kitchen table. The girls watched from the doorway, silent, wide-eyed, as if they already knew what was inside. The letter was from Sarah Devereaux, the girl's mother. She must be somewhere nearby. And what was she waiting for? Hiding, probably. She wrote not to apologize, but to explain. "I never stopped loving them. I just couldn't love them in a world that wanted to control what they were supposed to be." She wrote about the family name, the wealth, the political status. "I didn't want my daughters to be a story. I wanted them to have a story." She tried to get them to safety, but everything fell apart. And in a panic, she left them with someone she trusted. But that person had their own plans. By the time I realized they were gone, it was too late to find them without putting them in danger again. Until now. Until Luke. Luke didn't say anything for a long time after reading it. He just stared at the paper, the words, the signature, repeating both familiar and strange. Claire was the first to ask, "Is she coming?" Luke looked up. He met 4 pairs of eyes, tired with curiosity. "She wants to come," he said softly. "She's close. She's watching. But she doesn't want to come until she knows it's safe." Maggie, sitting cross-legged on the floor, whispered, "She left us." Emma gently took her hand. She left her name too. Maybe that's all she could take with her at the time. No one cried that night. No one screamed either. But the air in the cabin felt heavier, a little sad, and full of unspoken words. Luke stood by the fireplace, turning the letter over in his hands. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he did know this. The past had found them, and this time it was knocking. She didn't come to a big welcome, just a familiar-looking scarf and eyes that hadn't stopped searching since the day she'd lost it. Sarah stood at the edge of the front porch, not asking to come in, just waiting to see if the door would open. Luke stepped out first. He didn't ask her name. She looked tired, like someone who'd been walking for a long time and wasn't sure if she was going in the right direction. Inside, the girls were waiting. Emma sat bolt upright on the couch, her arms wrapped protectively around Maggie. Claire fiddled with the hem of her sleeve. Sophie stared at the floor. Luke cleared his throat. "She's here." No one moved for a moment. Then Emma stood quietly. She walked slowly, out onto the porch, walking straight toward the woman who'd braided her hair with stories. Sarah knelt before Emma could say anything. "I never stopped missing you and looking for you," she whispered. "I just didn't know how to be safe for you." Emma looked at her for a long, silent moment. Then she reached out not to hug, but to take Sarah's hand. And that was enough. The others followed one by one. Claire brought a drawing. Sophie handed her a cookie, a little burned, but still warm. Maggie held out a paper flower she'd made that morning for some reason. That night, they all ate at the same table. People who had been divided by fear, now quietly bound together by something softer. Luke watched them quietly. He wasn't the girls' father. Sarah wasn't just their mother. They are just part of something that doesn't need to be named, to be real. A week after Sarah returned, an envelope arrived by registered mail. The envelope was official. It came from a New York law firm, and a silver stamp embossed a name that neither girl had spoken in months. Devereaux. Inside, a legal invitation, a declaration, a path back to the life they had been born into, a trust fund, media coverage, guardianship debate, and a draft press release already written, waiting for their approval. Emma read every word. Sophie lifted the corner of the letter until it frayed. Claire asked if guardianship meant they were leaving the cabin. Maggie ran her finger over the bold family name and whispered, "Is that us?" That night, Sarah left it up to them. "I can't give you back what you lost," she said softly, "but I can give you a choice." The girls sat in a circle on the carpet, barefoot tangled blankets, a smoldering fire. They didn't speak in anger. They didn't argue. They just wondered aloud together. "Being a Devereaux means people see you a certain way," Emma said. "They already do," Sophie replied, "but not because of our name, because of what we've built here." Claire nodded. "People come to the Four Lanterns for what we give, not what we have." Maggie snuggled into Luke's lap and said, "I want to be a Harrison, 'cause that's the name that sticks." Luke didn't answer right away, but his arms tightened around her a little. The next morning they signed the papers. Refuse the offer to rejoin the estate. Request a legal name change. They wrote carefully in block letters. Emma Rose, Harrison, Sophie Lane, Harrison, Claire Elizabeth Harrison, Maggie, Violet, Harrison. Not to start over, but to start for real. They were not denying who they were. They were honoring those who had shown up on the coldest day in the quietest cabin when all they had was genuine affection and sincerity, and a man who had never asked for anything in return. Maggie had always loved the jars. Since her first morning at the cabin, she had arranged them in a neat little row by the window, each filled with water at a different level, carefully tuned to a note only she knew. She tapped them with a spoon when no one was looking, played soft music when the world was too loud. She called it calming music. No one questioned that, because when a child finds peace in something, you let them keep it. But one evening, weeks after the name change, after Sarah had settled back into the rhythm of the house, Luke noticed something strange. Maggie wasn't just playing, she was repeating. The same pattern, the same rhythm, the same 5-note sequence. Over and over, over and over. He crouched beside her. "Honey," he asked softly, "who taught you that song?" Maggie smiled. "Mom." Sarah froze in the doorway. She stepped in slowly, eyes wide. Can you play it again, Maggie?" Maggie nodded and tapped the jar again, clear, simple, innocent. Sarah's hand went to her mouth, then to her pocket. She pulled out an old folded envelope she'd carried with her for years. Inside was a page, torn in half, soaked with water. On it, a handwritten code. The notes were arranged alphabetically. It wasn't just a lullaby, it was a code. Sarah had left it for a friend long ago, a coded message that could lead to a safe deposit box. It was supposed to be a backup plan, a last resort. She'd taught the girls the tune when they were little, disguised as a bedtime song. And Maggie, without even knowing it, had kept it alive all this time. Inside the deposit box, when they finally opened it, birth certificates, guardianship papers, letters that had never been sent, and a trust held in the girls' names, untouched, unnoticed by the media storm surrounding the Devereaux estate. It was everything Sarah had tried to protect, hidden in the music, safe in the smallest of hands. That night, after the fire was out and the house was quiet, Luke sat alone by the jars. He tapped out 5 notes, slowly, gently, and whisper. Sometimes children carry things that we forget to keep, not because they were told to, but because love has its own memories. The shed behind had been a forgotten place. Old tools, broken furniture, dust older than Maggie. But now, it held laughter. It held paintbrushes and handprints, coats of all sizes, shelves of canned soup, a wooden sign on the door, carved by Emma and Luke. 4 lanterns where to find, more than just a shelter. It was a start, a space for people who didn't fit anywhere else. People who needed a meal, or a story, or just a place to sit and not be questioned. Inside the cabin, life wasn't perfect. The roof still creaked when it rained. Maggie still woke up some nights and needed a lullaby. Sophie's toast was often burned. But there were more cups now, more boots at the door, more voices reading bedtime stories aloud. Sarah slept in the living room, though no one really called it a bedroom anymore. Luke made breakfast most mornings unless Claire did it first. Emma kept a family calendar color-coded and precise. They weren't a traditional family. They were a real family. One evening, as the sun set behind the pines, Luke stepped outside with a cup of coffee and looked toward the old railroad tracks. No one was waiting there anymore. But the memory of that night, 4 small figures, huddled in the snow, stayed with him like an old friend. Maggie came quietly to him, holding the lantern she'd made from a glass jar. "Do you think we're lost?" she asked. Luke looked down, then out. The porch light flickered behind them. "No," he said softly. "I think you're just on your way." The jar in her hand glowed softly, a light that didn't burn out but didn't go out either. And maybe that was the point. Not to shine for everyone, but to stay lit long enough for someone to find it. Thank you for being here with us. If stories like this warm your heart, then you belong here. At Social Justice, we believe that gentle stories still have power. Before you go, subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments, when was the last time you felt found? And if you haven't, you're probably closer than you think. We will leave the lights on for you.